Part 1. The stars looked different now. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his warship and stared at the screen in front of him. He had seen these stars only in old pictures and videos. His great-great-great-grandparents had fled from this place 3,000 years ago. Now he was back. The ship was called the Retribution. It was huge, made of dark metal and covered with scars from 1,000 battles. Behind it, 699 other human ships followed in perfect formation. They had traveled across the galaxy for this moment. They had trained their entire lives for this moment. Some had died waiting for this moment. "Commander, all systems are working," said Amy Carter. She was young, only 25, but her eyes looked old. Every human in the fleet had those eyes. They were the eyes of people who carried ancient anger in their blood. Jake nodded slowly. He was 32 years old. His hair was already turning gray at the temples. Command did that to a person. So did carrying the weight of 3,000 years of human suffering. "Where is Earth?" he asked quietly. Lisa Grant worked at the navigation station. Her fingers moved across the glowing controls. She had red hair tied back in a tight ponytail. Her face went pale as she read the data. "Commander, Earth is gone. There's only debris. Rocks and crystals floating where our planet used to be." Jake closed his eyes. He had known this would be what he found. The records from the Exodus ships had been clear. The Calreth Empire had not just attacked Earth. They had destroyed it completely. They had broken the planet into pieces. 3 billion humans had died in a single day. "Show me," Jake said. The main screen changed. Now it showed a field of glittering stones spinning slowly around the sun. Some pieces were as big as mountains. Others were as small as sand. All of them had once been part of humanity's home. All of them had once been Earth. Danny Hayes spoke from the engineering station. He was a big man with rough hands and a gentle voice. "The quantum drives are holding steady, Commander. We can maintain position here for as long as you need." Jake appreciated that. Danny understood that sometimes a man needed time to look at what he had lost. The bridge was quiet. 40 people worked at various stations, but nobody spoke. They all stared at the screen. They all looked at what remained of Earth. Some of them cried silently. Others just stared with empty faces. "My grandmother told me stories about Earth," Amy said softly. "She said the oceans were blue, really blue, like nothing else in the universe. She said you could smell flowers in the spring. She said the rain felt cool on your skin. My grandfather talked about the forests," Lisa added. "He said trees covered whole mountains. He said birds sang every morning." Jake had heard similar stories. Every human child heard them. The stories were passed down like sacred texts. Earth had been beautiful. Earth had been peaceful. Earth had been home. Then the Calreth had come. The Calreth Empire was old and powerful. They had conquered 100 worlds before they found Earth. They gave humanity one choice: surrender and become slaves, or die. Humanity had chosen to fight. It had been a short war. 3 months from first contact to final destruction, but some humans had escaped. 50 colony ships had fled into deep space carrying 2 million refugees. Those ships had scattered across the galaxy, hiding in asteroid fields and dead star systems. They had survived by staying hidden and staying quiet. For 3,000 years, humans had lived in exile. They had built new ships in secret. They had scavenged technology from abandoned alien ruins. They had trained warriors who knew only one purpose: to return home and make the Calreth pay. "Signal the fleet," Jake ordered. His voice was steady now. The moment of grief was over. Now came the moment of purpose. "All ships maintain formation. We proceed to the Calreth home system in 6 hours. Everyone gets some rest. Check your weapons. Say your prayers if you have any. This is what we were born for." "Yes, sir," came the chorus of responses. Jake turned to Ryan Blake, who commanded the stealth ships. Ryan was thin and quiet with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Take your frigates ahead. Scout the Calreth system. I want to know exactly what we're facing." Ryan saluted. "We'll be ghosts, Commander. They won't see us coming." "Good. Dismissed." As the bridge crew returned to their duties, Jake walked to his private quarters. The room was small and plain. A bed, a desk, and a locker for his belongings. On the desk sat a small clear box. Inside the box was a handful of dirt. Jake picked up the box carefully. This dirt had been collected from Earth 3,000 years ago by his ancestor, a woman named Helen Morrison. She had scooped it into a container as her colony ship lifted off. She had sworn that one day her descendants would bring it home. Jake had carried this box his entire life. His father had carried it before him, his grandmother before that. Back and back through 100 generations of Morrisons, all waiting for this day. "We're here, Helen," Jake whispered to the dirt. "We came back. Just like we promised." He set the box down gently and sat on his bed. His body was tired, but his mind was racing. In a few days, maybe a week, the war would begin. The real war. Not the ambushes and raids that humans had been conducting for centuries, but a true war of annihilation. The Calreth homeworld was called Calvar. It was a large planet with 2 moons and a thick atmosphere. 2 billion Calreth lived there in massive cities. They had no idea that humanity still existed. They thought humans were extinct, another species erased from the galaxy. They were about to learn the truth. Jake thought about what was coming. His orders were clear: destroy the Calreth military, capture their emperor, dismantle their empire. But there was a question that haunted him. Should they destroy Calvar the way the Calreth had destroyed Earth? Part of him wanted to. Part of him wanted to watch their planet burn. An eye for an eye. A world for a world. Perfect justice. But another part of him, a quieter part, whispered that humanity had to be better than that. If they destroyed Calvar, how were they different from the Calreth? If they killed billions of civilians, were they heroes or monsters? Jake did not have an answer yet. Maybe he would find one when he stood on the Calreth homeworld with his gun in, his hand and their emperor at his feet. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said. Amy entered and stood at attention. "Commander, the crew is asking permission to hold a memorial service. For Earth, before we go into battle." Jake nodded. "Granted. Use the main hangar bay. I'll attend." "Thank you, sir." She turned to leave, but Jake stopped her. "Amy, do you think we're doing the right thing?" She looked surprised by the question. She thought for a moment before answering. "My great-grandmother died in the Exodus, Commander. She was only 5 years old. She got sick on the colony ship and they didn't have medicine. I never met her, but I know her name. I know her face. I know she loved strawberries and hated loud noises. The Calreth took her future. They took all our futures. So yes, sir, I think we're doing the right thing." Jake nodded slowly. "Dismissed." After she left, Jake stood and looked at himself in the small mirror on the wall. He saw a man who was young but felt ancient. He saw tired eyes and tight lips. He saw someone who had been raised from birth to be a weapon, but weapons did not ask questions. Weapons did not doubt, and Jake Morrison was full of questions and doubts. He pushed them aside. There would be time for philosophy later. Right now he had a war to win. Jake returned to the bridge. On the screen, Earth's debris field still glittered in the sunlight. It looked almost beautiful from a distance, like diamonds scattered across black velvet. "Set course for the Calreth system," Jake commanded. "Maximum speed. It's time to remind them that humanity is still alive, and we remember everything." The Retribution's engines flared to life. Around it, the rest of the human fleet followed. 700 ships moving as one, carrying 3,000 years of anger toward their target. In the hangar bay, 5,000 crew members gathered for the memorial service. They sang old songs from Earth. They read the names of the dead, 3 billion names that took hours to recite. They promised those names that justice was coming, and in the darkness between stars, the human fleet traveled toward revenge. The Calreth system appeared on their screens like any other star system. There was nothing special about it. 1 yellow star, 8 planets, and countless asteroids. But this system held the homeworld of the species that had destroyed Earth. That made it the most important place in the galaxy. Ryan Blake sat in the captain's chair of his stealth frigate. The ship was called Shadow's Edge. It was small and fast and almost invisible to sensors, perfect for sneaking into enemy territory. "Approaching the outer planets now," said Megan Foster. She was his sensor operator, a woman with dark skin and quick fingers. "I'm reading automated defense platforms. Lots of them." Ryan studied the display. The Calreth had built hundreds of weapons platforms throughout their system. They floated in space like metal sharks, waiting to destroy anything that came too close. Each one had missiles and energy weapons. Each one could kill a ship in seconds. "How are they positioned?" Ryan asked. Megan's fingers danced over her controls. "They're following predictable patterns, Captain. Same routes, same timing. Looks like they haven't changed their programming in a long time." Ryan smiled. That was the problem with old empires. They got comfortable. They got lazy. They stopped expecting threats. Launch the drones, he ordered. Target their communication relays first. I want these platforms blind and deaf before we move the main fleet in. 10 small drones shot out from Shadow's edge. They were tiny, barely larger than a human hand. They moved silently through space toward the nearest defense platforms. Each drone carried a virus designed by human computer experts. A virus that would shut down Calreth systems without them even knowing it had happened. The drones reached their targets and attached themselves to communication arrays. They began uploading their payloads. Within minutes, 50 defense platforms went silent. They kept moving in their patterns, but now they could not talk to each other or to Calreth command. First wave successful, Megan reported. Moving to the next group. Ryan watched patiently. This kind of work took time. You could not rush it. One mistake and the entire Calreth military would know humans were here. The surprise would be lost. Hours passed. More drones launched. More platforms went dark. Ryan's team worked with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this mission their entire lives. Every move was perfect. Every timing was exact. Captain, I'm detecting Calreth civilian ships, said Megan. Merchant vessels, maybe 20 of them. They're heading toward the inner planets. Ryan looked at the display. The ships were unarmed. They carried cargo, probably food or manufactured goods. Families might be on those ships, children, innocent people who had nothing to do with Earth's destruction. Let them pass, Ryan said quietly. We're not here for them. Some of his crew looked surprised. They had been told that the Calreth were the enemy, all Calreth. But Ryan had his orders from Commander Morrison. This was not about genocide. This was about justice. The merchant ships continued on their route, completely unaware that human warships were hiding nearby. They did not know that their entire civilization was about to change forever. All platforms in the outer system are compromised, Megan finally reported. They're blind. If the main fleet moves in now, these platforms won't see them coming. Ryan nodded. Good work, everyone. Send the signal to the Retribution. Tell Commander Morrison the door's open. While Ryan's stealth ships prepared the way, the main human fleet moved into position. Commander Jake Morrison divided his forces into 3 groups. Each group had a specific job. Each group had specific targets. Nicole Shaw commanded the first group. She was a hard woman with steel-gray hair and a scarred face. She had lost her parents to Calreth raiders when she was young. She had spent 40 years in the military, rising through the ranks by being smarter and tougher than everyone else. Her group consisted of heavy cruisers, big ships with thick armor and powerful weapons. Their job was to control the jump points, the places where ships entered and left the system. If any Calreth tried to run, Nicole's ships would stop them. All vessels report ready, said her second officer, a man named Gary Stone. He was young but competent. Nicole trusted him. Take us to Jump Point Alpha, Nicole ordered. Silent running. I want to be in position before the Calreth know we exist. Her ships moved slowly through space, their engines running at minimum power. They looked like asteroids or space debris, just more rocks drifting through the void. The Calreth sensors passed right over them. The second group belonged to Peter Walsh. He commanded the carrier vessels. These ships held thousands of small fighters. Each fighter had one pilot and enough weapons to destroy a Calreth cruiser. The fighters were fast and deadly like angry wasps. Peter was an older man, 60 years old, with white hair and calm eyes. He had been in more battles than anyone else in the fleet. He rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened. Launch reconnaissance fighters, Peter ordered. I want eyes on every Calreth military base in this system. 20 fighters shot out from the carrier bays. They flew in different directions, mapping everything. They recorded the positions of Calreth battleships, the locations of military stations, the strength of planetary defenses. The data they collected went straight to Commander Morrison on the Retribution. Jake studied every detail. He looked at the numbers and did the math. The Calreth had more ships. They had more weapons. They had home territory advantage, but humans had surprise. Humans had better technology. And humans had 3,000 years of anger pushing them forward. Amy, what's the status of the Calreth Imperial Fleet? Jake asked. Amy Carter worked at her tactical station, processing the incoming data. They have approximately 400 capital ships in system, Commander. Most are clustered around the home world. Another 100 are scattered throughout the system on patrol or guarding key installations. And their Emperor? On planet. Intelligence suggests he's in the capital city, completely unaware that we're here. Jake allowed himself a small smile. The Calreth Emperor's name was Vorkanis. He had ruled for 300 years. He had never faced a real threat. His empire controlled dozens of worlds. His military was feared across the galaxy, but he had never faced humans before. "Send the signal," Jake ordered. "All groups execute in 6 hours. I want every piece in place before we start this." The orders went out across the fleet. 700 human ships moved into their final positions. Some hid behind moons. Others positioned themselves in asteroid fields. A few brave captains brought their ships right up to Calreth military stations, hiding in the shadows. Danny Hayes worked non-stop in the engineering section. He checked every system twice. The quantum drives had to work perfectly. The weapons had to fire without fail. The shields had to hold against Calreth attacks. "How are we looking?" Jake asked over the communication channel. "All systems green, Commander," Danny replied. His voice was tired but confident. "The quantum drives are operating at peak efficiency. We've got enough power for a sustained battle." "Good. Get some rest if you can. When this starts, I'll need you at full capacity." "Understood, sir." Jake walked through the corridors of his ship. He saw crew members preparing for battle. Some checked their weapons. Others wrote letters to loved ones just in case they did not survive. A few prayed quietly in corners. He stopped by the medical bay. The doctors and nurses were setting up equipment, preparing for casualties. They had practiced this 100 times. But practice was different from reality. Soon these rooms would fill with wounded people, maybe dying people. "Are you ready?" Jake asked the chief medical officer, a woman named Kate Morgan. Kate looked up from her work. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and steady hands. "As ready as we can be, Commander. I hope we don't have to use any of this." "Me too." But Jake knew they would. War always had a cost. The only question was how high that cost would be. He continued his walk and ended up at the observation deck. Through the large windows he could see space stretching out forever. Somewhere out there, hidden among the stars, were the rest of his people, millions of humans living on colony stations and hidden bases, all of them waiting to hear if this mission succeeded. If Jake failed here, humanity might never get another chance. The Calreth would hunt them down. The exile would continue forever. But if he succeeded, if he destroyed the Calreth military and captured their emperor, then humans could finally go home. They could rebuild Earth. They could live without fear. "No pressure," Jake muttered to himself. Lisa Grant found him there an hour later. "Commander, it's time. All groups report ready." Jake took one last look at the stars. Then he turned and headed back to the bridge. "This is it," he said to his bridge crew as he sat in the captain's chair. "Everything we've trained for. Everything our ancestors died for. Today we show the galaxy that humanity is not dead. Today we show the Calreth that some debts cannot be forgotten." He took a deep breath. "All ships," Jake said into the fleet-wide communication channel, "execute attack plan. Let's bring them hell." 700 human warships dropped their stealth measures and appeared on Calreth sensors all at once. It must have looked like magic to the Calreth, like stars suddenly appearing out of nothing. The war had begun. The Calreth Military Command Center erupted into chaos. Alarms screamed through every corridor. Officers shouted at each other in their clicking, whistling language. Screens showed hundreds of unknown ships appearing throughout their system. Admiral Zekthor stood in the center of the command room. He was old by Calreth standards. His scales faded to a pale gray. He had served in the military for 2 centuries and had never seen anything like this. "Identify those ships," he demanded. A young officer worked frantically at his station. "Unknown, Admiral. The computer has no records of these designs. They're using technology we've never encountered." "Are they hostile?" The answer came in the form of explosions. On the view screen, Zekthor watched as 3 Calreth destroyers suddenly erupted in flames. They had been hit by weapons so fast the sensors barely registered them. "All ships to battle stations," Zekthor roared. "Launch all fighters! Activate planetary defense shields." But the Calreth military was slow to respond. They had not faced a real war in over 1,000 years. Their ships scrambled to power up weapons and shields. Their crews rushed to their posts. Everything took precious minutes. The humans did not give them those minutes. Ryan Blake's stealth frigate struck like invisible knives. They fired plasma torpedoes into the engines of Calreth cruisers. The big ships exploded from within, torn apart by chain reactions they could not stop. "Target acquired," said Megan Foster. "Calreth battleship, distance 3,000 kilometers." "Fire," Ryan ordered. The Shadow's Edge launched 6 torpedoes. They streaked through space and slammed into the battleship's reactor. The ship broke in half, both pieces spinning away into darkness. Another one down, Megan reported. That's 15 kills for our group. But the Calreth were starting to fight back. Energy beams lanced through space, searching for the human ships. A few beams found their targets. Ryan watched on his display as 2 human frigates took direct hits. They exploded instantly, taking their crews with them. Evasive maneuvers, Ryan said calmly. Don't let them get a lock on us. On the other side of the system, Nicole Shaw's heavy cruisers engaged the main Calreth battle fleet. Her ships were built like fortresses. They had thick armor and powerful shields. They could take punishment that would destroy other vessels. Enemy battleships approaching, Gary Stone reported. Count is 20 vessels. They're targeting us with their main weapons. All ships, forward shields to maximum, Nicole commanded. Return fire with everything we have. The space between the 2 fleets lit up with weapons fire. Energy beams, missiles, and plasma bolts flew in every direction. The heavy cruisers shook as Calreth weapons hit their shields. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. The smell of burning electronics filled the air, but Nicole's ships held their ground. They fired back with massive railguns that shot metal slugs at incredible speeds. The slugs punched through Calreth shields like they were paper. They tore through hulls and smashed through internal compartments. Direct hit on enemy flagship, Gary reported with satisfaction. Their command ship is venting atmosphere. Keep firing, Nicole said. Don't let up for a second. Meanwhile, Peter Walsh's carrier group unleashed its fighters. Thousands of small ships poured out from the carrier bays like angry insects. Each fighter had 1 pilot, 1 goal, and enough firepower to hurt ships 100 times its size. The fighter pilots were all young, most in their early 20s. They had trained in simulators since they were children. They knew every maneuver, every tactic, every trick. Now they put that training to use. Blue Squadron, target those defense platforms, ordered Linda Price. She was a squadron leader, flying at the front of her group. Red Squadron with me. We're going after those carriers. The fighters split up and attacked in coordinated waves. They moved too fast for the Calreth weapons to track. They flew in patterns that confused enemy targeting systems. When Calreth ships tried to shoot them down, the fighters simply weren't where the weapons expected them to be. Fox 3, missiles away, Linda called out as she launched her payload at a Calreth carrier. 4 other fighters in her squadron did the same. 20 missiles streaked toward their target. The Calreth carrier tried to defend itself. It launched countermeasures and fired its point defense weapons. It shot down 15 of the missiles. But 5 got through. They hit the carrier's hangar bay and detonated inside. The carrier exploded from the inside out. Pieces of metal and bodies flew out into space. Linda felt no sympathy. She had seen the records of what the Calreth did to Earth. She had seen the images of human cities burning. That's 1 less, she said coldly, moving to next target. On the bridge of the Retribution, Commander Jake Morrison watched the battle unfold. Multiple screens showed different parts of the fight. His ships were winning, but they were paying a price. Every few minutes, another human vessel disappeared from the tactical display. Casualties? He asked. Amy Carter checked her console. Her face was grim. 42 ships lost. Estimated 3,000 crew members killed. 3,000. Jake felt each death like a knife in his gut. Those were his people. His responsibility. But he could not stop now. If he pulled back, those deaths would mean nothing. Calreth reinforcements incoming, Lisa Grant suddenly announced. Multiple jump signatures. They're bringing in their reserve fleet. Jake stood up and walked to the main view screen. Sure enough, space was rippling as more Calreth ships emerged from faster-than-light travel. He counted quickly. 75 capital ships, maybe more. How did they mobilize so fast? Amy wondered. They didn't, Jake realized. These ships were already in nearby systems. They must have been on patrol or training exercises. It did not matter why they were here. What mattered was that the Calreth now had reinforcements and the humans did not. Danny, how much power do we have left? Jake asked over the internal communication system. We're at 70% capacity, Danny replied from engineering. The quantum drives are holding steady, but if we sustain heavy damage, we might lose them. Jake made a decision. All ships focus fire on the reinforcements. We cannot let them join with the main fleet. If they combine forces, they'll overwhelm us. Nicole Shaw received the order and turned her heavy cruisers toward the new arrivals. Her ships were already damaged from the first engagement. Their shields were weak. Their armor was scorched, but they moved to intercept anyway. "This is going to hurt," Gary said quietly. "Everything hurts," Nicole replied. "That's what war is. Now target their lead ships and fire." The human fleet hit the Calreth reinforcements before they were fully organized. The Calreth ships had just emerged from their jumps. Their crews were still getting oriented. Their weapons were still powering up. The humans gave them no time. Ryan's frigates launched torpedoes. Nicole's cruisers fired their railguns. Peter's fighters swarmed around the enemy ships like wolves around prey. The Calreth fought back desperately. They outnumbered the humans. They had more firepower, but they were disorganized and caught off guard. Ship after ship exploded under the human assault. Admiral Zekthor watched from his command center as his reinforcements died. He could not understand what was happening. These unknown ships fought with a fury he had never seen. They did not retreat. They did not hesitate. They just kept attacking no matter the cost. "Who are they?" He asked no one in particular. An intelligence officer looked up from his station. His scales were pale with fear. "Admiral, I've analyzed their ship designs. I've compared them to our historical database. And? They're human, sir." Zekthor's 3 eyes widened in shock. "That's impossible. We destroyed the humans 3,000 years ago. We broke their world. We scattered their people." "Apparently we didn't scatter them far enough," the officer said quietly. The battle raged for 18 hours. Neither side would give up. Neither side would retreat. The space around Calreth Prime became a graveyard of broken ships and floating bodies. Jake Morrison did not leave his bridge during the entire battle. He drank water when Amy brought it to him. He ate a protein bar when Danny insisted. But mostly he just watched and commanded and tried not to think about how many people were dying. "Commander, their main fleet is breaking apart," Lisa finally reported. Her voice was hoarse from hours of constant updates. "They're losing cohesion. Some ships are trying to retreat." "Don't let them," Jake ordered. "I want every Calreth military ship destroyed or captured. None escape." It was brutal. It was merciless. But Jake remembered Earth. He remembered 3 billion dead. If the Calreth had shown mercy then, maybe he would show mercy now. But they had not. So he would not. By the time the battle ended, the Calreth Imperial fleet was destroyed. 300 warships reduced to wreckage. 50,000 Calreth military personnel dead. The pride of their empire floating as debris. The humans had lost 97 ships. 7,000 crew members would never go home. But they had won. "All ships cease fire," Jake ordered. "Begin search and rescue operations for survivors." "Ours and theirs," Amy looked surprised. "We're rescuing Calreth?" "We're not them," Jake said firmly. "We'll take prisoners and we'll treat them according to the laws of war. We're here to end their empire, not to become monsters." He stood and stretched. His back ached. His eyes burned. His heart was heavy with grief for the dead. "Lisa, open a channel to the Calreth homeworld. It's time to talk to their..." Emperor Vorkanis stood in his throne room and tried to understand what had happened. 1 day ago he had been the ruler of the most powerful empire in the sector. Now his fleet was destroyed and unknown ships filled his sky. He was old, even by Calreth standards. He had lived for 300 years. He had ruled for 250 of those years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had conquered worlds and crushed rebellions. But he had never felt fear like this. "What do they want?" he asked his advisors. The advisors stood in a circle around him. They were all elderly Calreth, wearing elaborate robes that showed their high rank. They looked at each other nervously. None of them wanted to answer. "They claim to be human, Majesty," said one advisor finally. His name was Telmoth, and he was the oldest among them. "They say we destroyed their homeworld 3,000 years ago." Vorkanis tried to remember. 3,000 years was a long time, even for him. His empire had destroyed many worlds. The humans were just one among dozens. "I vaguely recall the incident," Vorkanis admitted. "A small species that refused to submit. We made an example of them." "How did they survive?" "Unknown, Majesty. But they have clearly survived and they have become powerful. Their technology appears to be superior to ours in several ways." Vorkanis walked to the large windows of his throne room. Through the crystal glass he could see the human ships in orbit. They looked dark and dangerous against the stars, like predators circling wounded prey. "What are our options?" he asked. Another advisor, a female named Silvara, spoke up. "We could evacuate you to a safe location, Majesty. We still have ships in other systems." You could rebuild the fleet and return, and leave our homeworld to these invaders? Never. Vorkanis turned back to his advisors. What about our planetary defenses? Telmoth's scales darkened with shame. Destroyed in the initial attack, Majesty. The humans disabled them before we even knew they were here. And our ground forces? We have 2 million soldiers on the planet, but they are trained for crowd control and policing, not real warfare. Without air support, they would be slaughtered. Vorkanis felt anger rising in his chest. His empire had grown soft. His military had become ceremonial. They had forgotten how to fight because there had been no one left to fight, until now. Open a communication channel to the human commander, Vorkanis ordered. I will speak with him. A few minutes later, a screen appeared in the throne room. On it was the face of a human male. He looked young, but his eyes were hard. He wore a simple military uniform with no decoration except a single insignia on his chest. I am Commander Jake Morrison, the human said. His voice was cold and controlled. You are Emperor Vorkanis. I am, Vorkanis replied. He tried to keep his voice steady and authoritative. I wish to understand why you have attacked my empire. Jake Morrison stared at him through the screen. You really don't remember, do you? 3,000 years ago, your empire came to a planet called Earth. You demanded we surrender and become your slaves. When we refused, you destroyed our entire world. 3 billion humans died. Vorkanis searched his memory. Slowly, details came back. A small blue planet. Primitive but defiant people. The decision to make them an example to other worlds. That was war, Vorkanis said. You chose to resist. We responded. You murdered 3 billion civilians, Jake said. Each word was sharp as a blade. You broke our planet into pieces. You scattered our people across the galaxy. You tried to erase us from existence. Many species have fallen to our empire, Vorkanis replied. That is the nature of conquest. The strong survive, the weak perish. Then by your own logic, your empire deserves to perish, because today you were the weak ones. Vorkanis felt a chill run through his body. The human was right. By Calrith philosophy, might made right. The strong ruled. The weak served or died. The humans had proven themselves stronger. What do you want? Vorkanis asked. Territory? Resources? Name your price for peace, Jake Morrison shook his head. We don't want your territory. We don't want your resources. We want justice. Justice? For something that happened 3,000 years ago. Time doesn't erase murder, Jake said firmly. Your empire has lived in peace and prosperity for 3,000 years. My people have lived in exile, running and hiding, always afraid. That ends now, Vorkanis thought quickly. He was a skilled negotiator. He had talked his way out of difficult situations before. Perhaps he could talk his way out of this one. Commander Morrison, I understand your anger, but I am not responsible for what happened 3,000 years ago. That emperor is long dead. His advisors are dead. The soldiers who destroyed your world are dead. I am guilty of nothing except being born into this empire. Jake was quiet for a moment. Vorkanis hoped his words were working. Then the human spoke. You're right. You personally didn't destroy Earth. But you have spent your entire reign enjoying the benefits of that destruction. You ruled an empire built on genocide. You lived in luxury while my people lived in fear. That makes you responsible. So you want revenge, Vorkanis said. You want to destroy my world as I destroyed yours? No, Jake said, and Vorkanis felt a small surge of hope. Then Jake continued. We're not going to destroy your planet. We're better than that. But your empire ends today. What does that mean? It means you will surrender unconditionally. Your military will be disbanded. Your colonies will be freed. Your government will be dissolved. You personally will stand trial for crimes against humanity and every other species your empire has oppressed. Vorkanis laughed bitterly. And if I refuse? Then we will come down there and take you by force. We will fight through your cities if we have to. Many of your people will die. Many of my people will die. But the result will be the same. You will lose. Vorkanis looked around at his advisors. They all looked defeated. None of them had any solutions. I need time to consider, Vorkanis said. You have 1 hour, Jake replied. After that, we're coming down. The screen went dark. Vorkanis sat heavily on his throne. He felt old and tired. For 300 years, he had been the most powerful being in the sector. Now he was nothing but a prisoner in his own palace. What should we do, Majesty? Telmoth asked quietly. Vorkanis thought about fighting. He could order his soldiers to resist. He could turn his capital into a fortress. Maybe he could kill enough humans that they would give up and leave. But he knew they would not leave. He had seen the look in Commander Morrison's eyes. That was not the look of someone who would give up. That was the look of someone who had waited 3,000 years for this moment. "Prepare my ceremonial armor," Vorkanis said finally. "If I am to surrender, I will do so with dignity." An hour later, Jake Morrison stood in a landing shuttle with 50 armed Marines. Amy Carter was there, along with Ryan Blake and several other officers. They all carried weapons. They all wore combat armor. "Are you sure about this, Commander?" Amy asked. "We could just bombard the palace from orbit. We don't need to risk troops on the ground." Jake checked his rifle one more time. "We're not here to commit war crimes. We're here to capture their emperor and end their military. That means going down there in person." The shuttle descended through the atmosphere of the Calreth homeworld. Through the windows, Jake could see cities spreading across the landscape. Millions of Calreth lived down there, going about their normal lives. They had no idea their world was ending. The shuttle landed in the palace courtyard. The door opened and Jake stepped out onto alien soil. The air smelled strange, full of scents he did not recognize. The gravity was slightly heavier than he was used to. Calreth soldiers surrounded the shuttle. They held weapons but did not point them. They just watched warily as the humans emerged. "We are here for your emperor," Jake announced. "Take us to him." A Calreth officer stepped forward. He was young, with bright green scales. "Follow me," he said in accented but understandable human language. They walked through the palace. Jake looked around at the elaborate decorations, the expensive art, the obvious wealth. All of it purchased with blood. All of it built on the graves of conquered species. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling stretched up 30 meters. Columns carved with battle scenes lined the walls. At the far end, sitting on a throne of polished stone, was Emperor Vorkanis. He wore ornate armor that gleamed with precious metals. He held a ceremonial staff in one hand. He looked every inch the mighty emperor, but Jake saw the fear in his eyes. "I am Commander Jake Morrison," Jake said loudly. His voice echoed through the chamber. "I am here on behalf of humanity to accept your surrender." Vorkanis stood slowly. He looked at Jake for a long moment. Then he looked at his advisors and soldiers. Finally, he looked down at his staff. 3,000 years, Vorkanis said quietly. "Your species waited 3,000 years to come back here." "We remember everything," Jake replied. "I can see that." Vorkanis descended from his throne. He walked across the floor until he stood directly in front of Jake. Up close, Jake could see how old the Emperor truly was. His scales were faded. His eyes were cloudy. He moved stiffly, like every step hurt. "I surrender," Vorkanis said. He laid his staff on the ground at Jake's feet. "The Calreth Empire is yours to do with as you wish." Jake picked up the staff. It was heavy and cold in his hands. It represented thousands of years of power and conquest, and now it belonged to humanity. 6 months had passed since the battle at Calreth Prime. 6 months since humanity had won its war of revenge. 6 months since Commander Jake Morrison had stood in an alien throne room and accepted the surrender of an empire. Now Jake stood on the observation deck of a new ship. This one was called the Phoenix Rising. It was the largest vessel humanity had ever built. Constructed from salvaged Calreth technology and human ingenuity, it served as the flagship for the reconstruction fleet. Below the ship, Earth rotated slowly in space. Except it was not really Earth anymore. It was still just a field of debris, rocks, and crystals that had once been a living world, but that was changing. Construction vessels swarmed through the debris field like worker bees. They gathered the fragments and processed them. Massive machines sorted through the rubble, separating useful materials from waste. Slowly, piece by piece, they were gathering the remains of Earth. "The atmospheric processors are online," Danny Hayes reported. He stood next to Jake, looking down at their work. Danny was now head of the entire reconstruction project. It was the biggest job anyone had ever attempted. "How long until we have breathable air?" Jake asked. 200 years, give or take." Danny saw Jake's disappointed expression and smiled slightly. "I know it's a long time, but we're literally rebuilding a planet from scratch. 200 years is actually pretty fast." Jake nodded. He understood the logistics. He understood the science, but part of him had hoped it would be faster. He wanted to walk on Earth's surface. He wanted to breathe Earth's air. He wanted to go home, but he would be dead long before that happened. His children would be dead. His grandchildren would be dead. Maybe his great-great-grandchildren would be the first generation to truly live on Earth. That had to be enough. "Show me the plans," Jake said. Danny pulled up a holographic display. It showed what Earth would look like when they were finished. Continents rebuilt from the debris. Oceans filled with water harvested from comets. Forests planted from genetic samples. Cities rising from empty plains. "We're starting with the superstructure," Danny explained, pointing to different areas of the display. "We'll use the larger debris fragments as a foundation. Then we'll build up from there, adding layers of processed material. It'll take 50 years just to create a stable core. And the water? We've identified 3 suitable comets in the outer solar system. We'll redirect them to Earth and let them impact in controlled locations. That'll give us enough water for basic oceans. The rest will add gradually over time." Jake studied the plans carefully. It was ambitious. It was probably impossible. But humans had done impossible things before. They had survived 3,000 years of exile. They had built a fleet from nothing. They had defeated an empire that had stood for millennia. Rebuilding Earth would be hard, but it would not be the hardest thing humanity had ever done. "What about the colonies?" Jake asked. "They're coming home." Danny switched the display to show the rest of the solar system. Red dots marked the locations of incoming ships. "We've sent word to every human settlement across the galaxy. Hundreds of colony ships are on their way. Some won't arrive for years, but they're coming." Jake felt emotion tighten his chest. For 3,000 years, humanity had been scattered. Hidden bases in asteroid fields, secret colonies on dead moons, refugee ships drifting between stars. All of them isolated, all of them afraid, all of them dreaming of home. Now they could finally come back. Amy Carter entered the observation deck carrying a data pad. She had been promoted to second in command of the entire fleet. She looked tired but satisfied. "Commander, the trial is ready to begin. They're waiting for you." Jake took a deep breath. "I'll be right there." Amy hesitated. "Jake, are you sure you want to do this? You don't have to be there. Someone else could handle it." "No," Jake said firmly. "I need to be there." "We all do." The trial was being held on a space station that orbited Mars. It was a neutral location, far from Earth but still in human space. Representatives from dozens of species had come to observe. The Galactic Council wanted to see how humans would handle justice. The courtroom was large and circular. Seats rose in tiers around a central floor. Jake took his seat in the front row next to Amy and Ryan Blake. Across from them sat Emperor Vorkanis, wearing simple prison clothes instead of his elaborate robes. The judges entered. There were 5 of them, chosen from different human colonies. They represented the diversity of humanity's exile. Old and young, male and female from different cultures and backgrounds. But they all shared one thing: ancestors who had died when Earth was destroyed. The head judge was a woman named Claire Foster. She was 70 years old with white hair and steady hands. She had spent 40 years as a legal scholar, studying the laws of war and crimes against sentient beings. "This court is now in session," Claire announced. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber. "We are here to determine the guilt or innocence of former Emperor Vorkanis of the Kalreth Empire. The charges are genocide, crimes against humanity, and violations of the laws of war." Vorkanis stood. He looked smaller now than he had in his throne room. Without his armor and crown, he was just an old alien who had made terrible choices. "How do you plead?" Claire asked. Vorkanis was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "I plead guilty to all charges." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Jake had expected Vorkanis to defend himself, to make excuses, to claim he was just following tradition. "You understand what you are admitting?" Claire asked. "I do," Vorkanis replied. "I ruled an empire built on conquest and genocide. I enjoyed the benefits of those crimes for hundreds of years." "I am guilty." Claire looked at her fellow judges. They conferred quietly. Then she turned back to Vorkanis. "Very well. Since you have pleaded guilty, we will move directly to sentencing. But first, does anyone wish to make a statement?" Jake stood up. "I do." He walked to the center of the floor. He looked up at Vorkanis. He thought about everything his people had suffered. He thought about 3 billion dead. He thought about 3,000 years of exile. "My name is Jake Morrison," he began. "My ancestor, Helen Morrison, was one of the last people to leave Earth alive. She watched from space as your empire destroyed her home. She spent the rest of her life in exile, living in a cramped colony ship, always hoping to return. Jake pulled out the small, clear box he always carried, the box with Earth's dirt inside. This is all she managed to save, a handful of dirt. She passed it to her daughter, who passed it to her son, who passed it down through generations until it reached me. This dirt is 3,000 years old. It's older than your reign, Emperor. It's older than most civilizations. He held the box up so everyone could see it. You asked why we came back after so long, why we didn't just forget and move on. This is why. Because we carry Earth with us. We carry it in our DNA, in our memories, in our stories. You can destroy a planet, but you cannot destroy the idea of home. Jake lowered the box. You are guilty. You admit it. But I don't want you executed. Death would be too easy. I want you to live a long life. I want you to watch as humanity rebuilds everything your empire tried to destroy. I want you to see us succeed where you wanted us to fail. He turned to the judges. That is my statement. Claire nodded gravely. Thank you, Commander Morrison. She looked at Vorkanis. Do you have anything to say before we pass sentence? Vorkanis stood slowly. I do not ask for mercy. I do not deserve it. But I will say this. I understand now why you fought so hard to come back. Home is not just a place. It is an idea, a dream, a promise. Your species kept that promise across 3,000 years. That is remarkable. He paused, then continued. My empire believed that might made right. We believed that conquest was glorious. We believed that weak species deserved to be destroyed. We were wrong. Strength is not measured in weapons or ships. It is measured in endurance, in hope, in the refusal to give up even when everything is lost. Vorkanis looked directly at Jake. Humanity is strong, not because you defeated us in battle, but because you survived when we thought you would perish. I spent my life building an empire. You spent yours preserving a dream. History will remember which was more valuable. Claire and the other judges deliberated for an hour. When they returned, everyone in the courtroom stood. Former Emperor Vorkanis, Claire announced, you have been found guilty of genocide and crimes against sentient beings. You are sentenced to life imprisonment. You will spend the remainder of your days on a prison station, where you will observe the reconstruction of Earth and the rebirth of humanity. You will write a complete history of the Kalreth Empire's crimes, so that future generations will know what you have done. Vorkanis bowed his head. I accept this sentence. Guards led him away. Jake watched him go. He felt no satisfaction, no joy, just a deep tiredness and the knowledge that this chapter was finally closed. After the trial, Jake returned to the Phoenix Rising. He went to his quarters and sat on his bed. The small box of dirt sat on his desk where it always did. He picked it up and held it gently. We did it, Helen, he whispered. We came back. We're going home. Over the next months and years, the reconstruction continued. Human colony ships arrived from across the galaxy. Millions of people who had never seen Earth came to help rebuild it. They brought technology, knowledge, and hope.